All right, good afternoon. We now call the February 19th, 2026 Policy Review Committee meeting to order. Mr. Wilburn, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Representing Educational District at Large, seat 7, and Chairman of the Policy Committee, we have Mr. Alfred Shibby Brooks.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large, seat 8, we have Dr. Casey Brock.
Present.
Also present, we have Chair of the Board, Ms. Jessica Johnson, our Superintendent, Dr. Brian Johnson, our General Counsel, Madam Nina Gupta, Ms. Carolyn Burnett, and Ms. Sandra Murray. And also present via Zoom, we have Board Member Mr. Tony Mitchell. Chairman Brooks, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to approve the January 20th, 2026 Policy Review Committee minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Mitchell, who is attending virtually, seconded by Board Member Brock, Dr. Brock, for respect on it. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the February 19th, 2026 Policy Review Committee meeting agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
So moved by Board Member Dr. Brock, seconded by Board Member Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now review the policies on the agenda. Ms. Carolyn Barnett, will you please present the first policy?
Good afternoon, board members, Board Chair Brooks. Today, we will be discussing several policies around APS's thoughts when it comes to our most vulnerable students in the light of certain things going on. And then we will also be talking about consideration when it comes to excused absences, and then we will close out the conversations around board office financial procedures. So our first policy today that we will, you all will be discussing is policy EBB safety, and I will pull the mock-up. So with this policy, our legal counsel really wanted, as we think about the things that we can do in our sphere of influence at Atlanta Public Schools, we really wanted to put in language, EBB is safety, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see where it calls out interactions with external agencies, and you will see the language that we're asking you to review. All representatives of external agencies, including external law enforcement officials, will be treated as visitors to the school, consistent with OCGA Statute 22-1160 and Board Policy KM. At all times, the district will appropriately balance the requests of external law enforcement officers with the legal rights of students and staff. So this policy comes before you today for discussion.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues on the policy change as read?
Nothing on my end.
Seeing none.
Sorry. I do
Sure.
actually.
Board Member Brock.
Just to make sure I have an understanding, the idea of them being treated as visitors is so that they cannot forcefully enter the building.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And it's consistent with what's happening in practice already. Just thought it might be helpful to put it in policy to make it clear for everyone.
Yes. Is there any additional clarification for the good of the public that we could make about what this procedurally would look like in reality?
Sure. So on the agenda for today, there is a revision to policy KM, but there's also an administrative regulation that is attached to KM, and there are revisions proposed to that internally that mirror exactly what's happening. So we know that law enforcement officials can only access APS students or staff or student records upon a subpoena, a court order, a judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant, but a judicial warrant or parent authorization. So we're making it very clear that those external agencies or law enforcement officials are to stay in the front office. They are to be greeted. They are to show their identification, make sure we know who is in our schools. And if they do present a valid, appropriate paperwork to access a student or a staff member or records, what the procedures are there if that happens.
So to be clear with the public, although particular agencies have been utilizing judicial warrants as a means to enter residence or other structures, a judicial warrant will not suffice on Atlanta Public Schools properties.
An administrative warrant
Correct.
will not suffice. A judicial warrant that has been signed off by a judge, that is valid, that will suffice.
Thank you for the clarification. Are there any other additional inquiries or comments?
No, just a comment. I appreciate this being an addition. I think it's really important for the protection of our students and families.
Yeah, I would like to second that. I know that there's been a lot of concern throughout our community and our city, and that, there's been a call for us to establish policies to ensure the safety as best we can for our students and our staff. So I do appreciate this. Are we seeking to move this to final approval to the board, or are we seeking to just have first read today?
So that is up to the goodwill, the judgment of this policy committee.
Yes.
Whether you want to move it on to first read or final approval. Just note that the usual policy adoption process anticipates first read and then final approval. But final approval, you can skip the first read process if it is a policy of revision is unanimously adopted by the board for final approval.
So, Board Member Mitchell, do you have any thoughts before we even entertain which way we want to move with it? I'll take that as affirmation. So,
Sorry, I do not. I'm sorry. I was trying to get off of mute.
that button hides from us sometimes. So, but you said you do not have any additional commentary on it?
No, I mean, I kind of echo what you and Dr. Brock brought up. I do think that this is something that is needed. I think that we've had a lot of questions around just safety in general, especially with our kids, and a lot of the kind of social political kind of spaces that we've been in over the last month and a half. So glad to see us putting something on paper to make sure that we are keeping kids protected the way that we should. So
Okay.
I'm in agreement.
I guess now I will entertain a motion to move this policy to final approval and to the full board.
Yeah, motion to move to final approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Seeing none, I think we agree to move it to final approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next policy also is in line with EBB. It is KM. When you think about visitors that come to our school, so I will pull up the mock-up. So with this policy, it's a little more extensive when we call out. The Atlanta Board of Education also recognizes that at times we still talk about the external agencies, including law enforcement agencies, may seek access to school. But then we go a little further to call out under the paragraph, the district's highest priority is to provide a safe, secure, and orderly education environment, and the board limits visitors to. At the last bullet, you will see the board limits visitors to external agencies, including law enforcement agencies, with a legitimate need and valid authorization to access APS schools. That's the bullet that we're adding in. And then if you skip down to the next paragraph that starts with all visitors must sign in, you will see that any other applicable laws and administrative regulations issued officer by the superintendent unless explicitly authorized to do by law, so by virtue of the status as a law enforcement officer. Visitors who may interact with students other than their own children shall comply with the requirements of policy GAK 1, criminal background check. The criminal background check requirement does not apply to representatives of external agencies authorized by law to have access to students in accordance with Administrative Regulation KMR 1, and that is where we spell out the guidelines to how a visitor can interact with our schools. This policy also comes up for discussion.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues?
Quick question on my end. I think that this makes sense along with the first one. My question is, how are we defining legitimacy? I know in that let's see, sixth bullet or fifth bullet, we talk about with a legitimate need. How is that defined? Is that at the discretion of school leadership, or how do we navigate with that definition of legitimacy?
So this is how I see it working in real life. So the valid authorization part is sort of the bigger umbrella. You've got to have valid authorization. So think about a DFACS official who is investigating a child neglect action, and they want to speak to the child, and they want that child pulled out of class to have a conversation with the child. They may have valid authorization to speak to the student. They may not have a legitimate need to do it right then and there. The principal or whoever's in charge of the building might ask that DFACS official to wait until a free period or a lunch period or recess to talk to the child so as to interrupt instruction.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like that's kind of the scenario I'm envisioning, or just like, what do we consider something that is like rises to the point of when someone would need to pull a child out of class in that moment, versus something that could wait either later in the school day or to be outside of the school day. So we're just curious on how we're framing out the legitimacy in that space.
Are there any other questions? We have our student rep, Ms. Brooke, with us as well. How you doing?
I'm good, enjoying my break so far, and I'm happy to be here.
All of us in Clayton County are envious. Are you, did you have any commentary or questions about this policy?
When I was reading it, I really liked how specific all of like the measures here are, because I think that they're very important, but maybe it's not a issue for here, but I was just curious to know like how serious the execution of these will be across the different schools.
So, the next thing on the agenda is an administrative regulation. That's not for the committee to adopt, but it's just for information transparency, and that'll give you a good idea of how it's supposed to work. But I will say this: every policy is words on paper, and we trust the people in charge of the system to give life to them. I feel comfortable sharing that since January of 2015, administration has worked very, very hard to push this information out and expectations out to school leadership, partner schools, charter schools, all the rest of it, of how we expect our students and staff to be treated.
Thank you.
Yes. I guess I just have one comment, which is that to echo what you just said, Madam Counsel, that we promote what our measures are. I think that would be helpful as, much of what we are putting on paper today is in support of what standing policy has been. But I think the lack of visibility and common knowledge about our procedures has left some to wonder if we had something in place or not. And I think this would help to quell a lot of concerns and bring more comfort to our community if we do our due diligence to promote.
Yes. Communication is key when it comes to ensuring that we're following policy, following guidelines. So, yes, sir.
Yes. I guess because these are like accompanying policies, I would have the same posture. Is there a motion to move this to final approval to the full board?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Second.
Any opposition? Seeing none, I think we will go ahead and move this forward as well.
Thank you, Board Chair. Our next, as our legal counsel stated, will be the review for information of KMR1, our regulation to the visitor to school policy. And so under the approved visitors, you will see there's been added the external agencies, including external law enforcement officials with a legitimate need and valid authorization to access APS schools. And then as you scroll down, it goes into detail around external agencies for time. I won't read all of that, but I want to make sure that we're calling out the first paragraph, which says APS recognizes that at times representatives of external agencies, including external law enforcement officials, may seek access to APS schools. APS also recognizes that its students have a right to access public education and legally protected privacy rights. APS also seeks to create a safe learning environment. In seeking to appropriately balance these interests, the following rules will apply to external law enforcement officials. We go on to detail that information, and I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. So that, under that section, it really combs out the things that when you're talking about what we should be communicating, this is the information that we'll be communicating to our schools. This is just for information purposes, and we just wanted you all to see how your policy framework goes over to superintendent's regulations to ensure that that's what's happening on the ground.
And I do want to be clear that these revisions, and Brooke, before you tell me, I already noticed a typo, so I will fix it.
Brooke is on it.
This is what has been happening since January of 2015. And I realize that a lot of the conversation is around one particular law enforcement agency that has been particularly active, but these rules really apply to every law enforcement agency, whether it be ICE, whether it be the Atlanta Police Department, whether it be the FBI or whomever. And this is the information and standards that have been repeatedly communicated out to building leadership and school officials since January of 2015.
Also, I do think it's important to call out that as we were developing these, we really thought about, like, what's currently happening is one thing, but foreseeing that other external agencies could still come in and do the same. You just want to make sure that we're covering all bases.
Thank you. Board Member Brock, did you have some thoughts?
A couple thoughts. So one, we have to put them as approved visitors. Like, I mean, I understand like that we're going to have the protocol and everything, but to name it as like, you're an approved visitor, I don't know, I was wondering, like, I mean, does Does it have to be an addition?
So, I mean, it does say external agencies with legitimate need and valid authorization. So it's not just anyone off the street, but let's be real here. Anyone off the street can walk into at least the front office area of a school, right? They ring the doorbell and we let them in, and we keep them there until we know who they are, what they're doing there, and whether they're allowed to be there. So whether a law enforcement official or an external agency official identifies themselves as such, they could gain access that way. But once you're in the front office and you want to have presence on our schools, we need to know that you have a legitimate reason to be there and authorization to be there. And that's what this is meant to speak to.
My question is there a difference between a visitor versus someone who comes into our front office? And the distinction that I'm trying to make is that as a visitor, you're giving them your name, they're printing out the name tag for you, you're sticking it on yourself, and then you're able to walk through the security vestibule and into the school hallways. By making them an approved visitor, does that then give approval for their presence without need? Because being a visitor doesn't necessarily require a need, the same as a student coming back to visit on college break. There might not be a particular meeting or business that they have there, but they're coming to visit.
I think there's all kinds of visitors, but for external agencies, if you're there in that capacity, it does say you need a legitimate need and valid authorization to be there.
So would that then make a distinction that they are not there to be a visitor, but they are there for official business?
Potentially, but our policy also calls out individuals with official business approved in advance by the school principal, and it describes that as a visitor to the school as well as outside service providers who might be providing services to children, like therapy services. You can be there just to say hi, or you can be there as part of your job, but we consider you, like if you're not part of the APS family, we consider you a visitor.
Might just a wondering I have is if we maybe, Madam Council, we can change the heading, because, and I don't know what to. I'm not that far down the road, but I think the word approved is the trigger that could create some tension. So maybe we can look at the heading.
Yeah, I would honestly be willing to vote. Me personally, I don't even support putting external agencies as approved visitors.
So I'm wondering where you're finding the word approved, because I see the word approved in.
It's the heading.
It's in the heading and the
It's
regulation.
the regulation heading.
Yes, it says approved visitors.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
was looking
and
at
I-
the wrong
and-
document. Can we just remove the word
I-
approved?
Yeah, just put,
I even wonder if it needs the heading to ensure the safety of students and to protect confidentiality
Yeah,
of students and
let's
families.
remove it.
Just
Okay.
remove we can just remove the
'Cause
heading.
I think it's the spirit of that
I
that
get
we're not.
Thank you. I was just totally not
Okay.
connecting on
Yeah.
that, so I appreciate that. Thank
And
you.
that's kind of what I was getting at when I was like, does it have to be on there? Because I think there's something that feels like an invitation when you say
Yes.
approved, and it's like we're not inviting you. Like, oh, we're approved. Let's go up in there and see what we
Yeah.
can do, right?
Well, and this is an easy one because it's a reg, so like scratch it out. It's gone.
Yeah. I have one more question. So D, on the next page for external agencies, where it talks about notifying the parent or guardian, just wondering around that one, I could see that being tricky. Like, what if you can't get in touch with the parent? And what does it look like for that wait time to ensure that there is actual approval from the parent or guardian that they have access to the student?
So if we have assigned parental authorization, it's there. As a practical matter, it is virtually impossible to hand over all student records while someone is standing in front of you, even with parental authorization. But our internal standard, we actually have a template letter when we get a subpoena for student records, which happens pretty frequently, where we send a letter to the parent and guardian. We inform them that we have received this request for records, and that we're going to release them, and we usually give them 10 business days, unless we are restrained by some judicial authority from releasing them. And that's the language that we use. That gives the parent that gives them two things: notice that we're about to release records unless someone bigger than us tells us no, and it also gives the parent the opportunity to go to court or go to this agency or go to whomever to try and argue against and stop the release of records.
I have a point about G on the same page. I'm wondering if there could be wording that like makes it clear that if should an external agency come to arrest a student or staff member, that a parent is like immediately notified or like notified first. Like for example, in D it says first, or like I wonder is just like a word to show like as soon as possible, as soon as the student is like in question about this type of situation.
Sure. And just to give you, so for D, the lag time and notification, that is part of federal law that a school system has to notify the parent. But for G, how about we add, we'll notify the parent guardian of the student in question as soon as practicable?
Yeah, I agree with as soon as practical.
Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Board Member Mitchell, anything on your side?
Yeah, nothing further on my end.
All right, thank you. I'm wondering what our posture is. Would we like to move this one ahead as well, or do we want?
This one is a
No, this is a
regulation.
regulation.
Yes. So
Y'all have
we're
fun
good.
with that.
Consider it done.
Y'all have fun with that.
It's done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Our next policy that we will be discussing is Board Policy JB, Student Attendance. Pull this up. And this policy comes before the board for discussion to consider excused absences in the light of civic engagement. And so under the bullet absences and excuses, in accordance with the provisions of State Board Rules 165-1-10, student attendance, the Atlanta Board of Education defines acceptable excuses for being absent from school as the new bullet you can find at the bottom: 2 days or fewer per school year for lawful participation in civic or political events, provided that the parent provides written notice to the school at least 2 school days in advance. Civil or political events include, but are not limited to, meetings of public agencies such as the Georgia General Assembly, City Council, county commissions, and school boards, legislative hearings, peaceful protests, demonstrations, community organizing event activities, and voter education activities. This policy is up for discussion for our board.
Thank you. I wanted to just quickly make comment on this policy. In light of recent events and students exercising their First Amendment rights, there's been a lot of discussion about students' ability to utilize their First Amendment right to organize, to give free speech, exercise their free speech without the consequence or the fear of suspension or retribution from an administration. Moreover, after having more thought about this initiative, I had to really think to myself, where could we as a district really encourage our young people to be more engaged civically in a myriad of ways. So I think about how few students attend our work session meetings because they're in class, and we're having them in the middle of the day. How few students wouldn't be able to tell you how many county commissioners there are, how many city council members there are, couldn't tell you how many school board members there are, and that we should be encouraging them to become more civically engaged as well as civically knowledgeable. And what that looks like is giving them the ability to attend these meetings, utilize their First Amendment rights without risking, taking an absence or an unexcused absence. And so that is the spirit of this policy change, and I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from my colleagues.
Well, personally, I just had a question about, provided that the parent provides written notice to the school at least 2 days in advance. So for certain demonstrations, they are more spontaneous, or also they come from the student, where the student has to advocate for themselves. As a member of the Student Advisory Council, there's like consistently things that I may be doing that maybe during the school day, and I kind of like take the charge to communicate with the leadership around me. So maybe like add some language about like just, or maybe remove something that, as long as there is notification, like, and not specifically from a parent. I don't know. Because we're talking about students, maybe a parent does have to be in there, but that's what I was thinking.
Well, I guess my question would be, at what point are students able to check themselves out?
When they're 18.
When they're 18, right? And so I hear you, but I'm already hearing Nina. Oh yeah, I'm already hearing it. So I guess my question is there potential to make distinction for students who are 18 as opposed to students who are not 18? For me, I think that's kind of maybe where there's wiggle room on that. Like, if I can check myself out, then why do I need a parent letter?
So, and this is a question I don't know the answer to. Let's say an 18-year-old student has a doctor's appointment in the middle of the school day. Can that 18-year-old student sign an excuse themselves to get it excused, or do they still need their parent or guardian?
At my school, kids can sign themselves out, so I'm just curious.
But
what's
the
our
question
policy?
is, like, is that going to be an excused absence?
If they go to the doctor and they receive a doctor's letter upon their return to school, Dr. Johnson, what would be the answer to that?
Or like if they go to vote, so we know they're going to be 18, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, that specific situation, I think I want to go back to the spirit of what this is, right? So when I think about the spirit of this, I'm going to use my son because one day he'll be 18, hopefully sooner than later. I hope that, like, when I see this exercise, I think it's an opportunity for our students that have, parents and guardians available in the home for them to engage in the conversation and the dialogue and to be a part of that. So we don't want to necessarily create a situation where we're cutting a parent or guardian out of that opportunity to, because if my son said, say, a peaceful protest, if my son wanted to be engaged in a peaceful protest, I hope he'd come and have that conversation with me, right? And I'm on a dialogue about the why. Why are you doing this? And if he can articulate the why, I'll go forth. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful and careful when we're starting to deal with that component. I would also call out, last year, we actually added the graduation, so this is separate, but then on the same thing. We've created more flexibility for our parents and families and our students in particular around this. Last year, we added the commencement component around siblings, and then this year, Boardman Brooks brought forth, like, hey, look, we want our students to be civically engaged and civic minded. In particular in the environment that we're in. And I think you'll maybe even hear in some dialogue we're thinking about the community service component, like that there's some interconnectedness, but there's a real opportunity here to just make sure that obviously you've been chosen to be on this committee, but to make sure that students understand how the process works, right? Like what's going on here, what's going on across the street, and then one more block up at the state capitol and other places as well. Like we want our, and in particular in Atlanta Public Schools. So that's the spirit of it, is not to cut anybody out, but to really include folks. But we also don't want to cut parents and guardians out of the process of being a part of the dialogue as well.
Sure. I'm sorry, Board Member Brock.
Okay, so I have just a couple of things here. So one question I have is about the value we're putting on certain events and reasons a student would be able to leave, right? So there's some examples here that are like really obvious, but then I wonder like how far will the approval go of what's an acceptable reason to not be in school based on this? By the way, I fully like support like the spirit behind this, but just wondering, like where does that kind of end? Because I think there gets to be a point where there's like opinions about what actually matters in terms of civil engagement and what doesn't. And obviously this also means if it's not something that's maybe aligned with what the majority is thinking is something that is good for the community, that is still, a student still has the right to leave school for that reason. And so just keeping that in mind, but also wondering with teachers and wondering what their feedback or response would be to this. I could see a world in which, this is like pessimistic thinking, right? I could see a world in which maybe this would be on a date where there's something really important happening in school. And so at that point, where does that line get drawn on like a teacher's, I don't know, that's just like another thought, it's like, should there be like a teacher, not approval, but some kind of engagement there? Because if it's a big test day and it's like, well, I have this excused approval, but it just happens to be on a huge test day, it's just like a tougher thing. So those are just like two things, but I do think it would be incredible for students to be able to have this kind of opportunity. And my push would be, what can we put in place to make sure that there's education provided around these different opportunities so that students know what they might be able to do, right? So if we're saying you get this excused absence, are we telling them more about city council? Are we sharing the calendar with them about events that they can attend? And also, what does transportation look like to these things? I think there's just like a lot of questions around just making it meaningful. I would hate for us to put this into place and then it's not a meaningful thing. And also, they can go in groups. So then thinking about that too, and like, these are all the things. Now, again, I'm saying all these things because I'm thinking them, also feeling like this is something good to put in place, but things that I think we need to just like consider.
Those are good points. Ms. Brooke, did you have any comments?
I wanted to add about the part not cutting parents out, but I thought about it more about parent provides written notice. So whenever I'm leaving for something or something's being excused, it comes from Dr. CT, like who sends it to the people who handle attendance, and then they just automatically update it because it's Dr. CT. So maybe add something about like who who it comes from, like an adult or something, like a trusted adult or adult who's over the event, something like that. Because even like for we just had a protest at KIB. But it was like and even when you talk about the protest, because we talked about the protest that a school is having has to be approved, or else students can get like consequences for not having an approved protest. So if we can add language around there, because there's already language in the handbook of APS about making sure that those things are approved. If it's coming from a school, we can add in that in there. I'm sorry, that was confusing.
I appreciate both the feedback from both of you. First Amendment doesn't require and necessitate approval. And that's always been my pushback as to why it's about notice and not approval. Because when we get to the place of approval, then yes, you put yourself in a position where somebody wants to support something that is not necessarily the consensus position. Now you're dealing with, well, you approved it for them, but you didn't approve it for me, and right? And I don't think that's the position that we want to be in. I don't think that is the spirit of what the First Amendment is about. And we all know that students do not lose their access to their First Amendment rights upon entering a school. Very different than being a teacher, but for students, you know, they still do retain those rights. So I do feel good about the notice piece. I am also reflective about maybe the 2-day piece, that sometimes things can be a little bit more timely than that. I think just saying that there is notice and not necessarily putting a 2-day note, like 2-day, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for to connect it, but necessity,
one-day notice?
requirement, right? Maybe requirement is the word I'm looking for.
I mean, you're usually going to know the day before, right?
At least, but 2 days, I think, then says like, if there's something that happened on a Wednesday, I would have to let you know by Monday.
Right, so we can make it a one-day notice, like a one school day notice?
That's fair. So like not day of, if you will. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And Ms. Brooke, I think too, like the spirit of this is to make it where exactly what you said. If this thing is not approved, then there's a consequence for it not being approved. And again, that goes into, that's not the spirit of the First Amendment, right? Like that you have to have approval. So, and I'm open to feedback on that, but to me, it just feels contrary to what we're trying to do. Sarah Johnson, do you have some thoughts?
I do, and I think I'm trying to figure out where the balance is, because I think our responsibility as a district is to ensure that students are safe while they are expressing themselves, and I think the notice part of it allows the district to be prepared to ensure the safety of our students in general. And so, I understand what you're saying about approved versus notice. I don't think we would ever want to be in a position where a parent is unaware that their child is actively utilizing their voice and expression on a particular issue. And I don't think we ever want to be in a position where we are also unprepared as a district to support our students from any external factors that might prevent them from being able to do so safely. And so maybe I agree with them. Maybe it's the day's notice piece, or if there is an option where parents are able after the fact to submit, a letter. I'm not sure, but I think the parent piece is important. Maybe the time, there's some wiggle room, but I also don't want the district to be in a position where we have less than 24 hours to be prepared to protect our students in any situation.
So I'm on in a similar light, but in a little bit different context. I'm gonna put on the school administrator hat for a minute. I always think, and let me say for me, I wanna be careful. Anytime I've served as superintendent, I've never left the principalship from the standpoint of like thinking about how to operationalize whatever it is we implement. And what I don't want to put schools in a position of across the district is where I think the board has to be cautious. It's board policy, not regulation, right? So from a board standpoint, that we don't implement something that the principals can't get, the schools can't get their arms around. And so I think that's one of the fine lines that we really have to walk here from the standpoint of, ideally, what's happening is our school leaders, and I'm being idealistic, have a really quality relationship with student leadership and are engaging them in, consistent dialogue, conversation. Hey, we want to do thing X, or we're thinking about thing Y, and that school leader is helping them think through the avenues they have to go and do that whatever it is, right? Like if they want to protest, whatever it is, here's how you can do that in a safe manner, because safety comes as top of mind. But on the back end, we also want to create enough space for students to be able to lift their voice. And so I think there's this real fine line that we do walk, and how do you operationalize this and implement whatever comes, because if our students, going back to what Board Member Brock says, we talk through this, we make sure they're clear on how to, the options that they have. All of a sudden, you've got this environment where people are looking back, principals are looking back to the board saying, what in the world did you all create, and how have you all created it? And so I think that's the fine line that has to be walked, in particular dealing with secondary students that are quite bright, and understand how to leverage the thing. Now, it's only 2 days, you know what I mean? So it's only a couple of times. But again, it's something that we want to be mindful of.
Yes, I appreciate that. And two, why I think we've had some conversations about having like 6-month follow-up reviews of like policy changes that we make, so that we can be nimble if we made a mistake meant well and caused harm, that we could reverse course and it not be 5 years later. So I did want to add that in as well, because I do think I agree with you, because sometimes you can have unintended outcomes. Yeah. Dr. Brock?
Where was my question? Oh my goodness, I had a question here somewhere. Okay, well, I'll just ask this other one that I had. One other thing I was thinking about parent approval is I do think we're in the kind of political environment where a lot of students are not going to agree with their parents politically.
That's true.
And even with the recent sanctioned walkouts, I know that there were some parents who were not happy with the sanctioned walkout. And so I'm also thinking like, okay, well, if a student really wants to do something, but then a parent's like, girl, stay in school. No, we're not doing that. How frustrating that could be, but also how, like, then what happens, right? When all of your friends are going to this thing together and you can't go because your parent didn't approve that for you, which I could very well see happening. So that's just a thought, again, for us to consider. And I'm also wondering, like, what would, I don't know, I feel bad like saying this, but what if maybe like this was something for juniors and seniors? Or like, I mean, is there like an age or like and kind of like, okay, by the time you're in that grade and maybe you've taken a civics class, that now because you are more aware of what's available to you and like what's in the city and this, that, and the other, that now you have this opportunity over the next couple of years to politically engage. That way, like thinking safety-wise, getting to and from, you're a little bit more like, you can get on the MARTA, get on whatever, get the transportation there. But then two, it's like something that happens after they've learned a little bit more about what is out there and available for them to participate in. Just an idea.
I appreciate the spirit of that. I think my pushback would be that, we don't attain our First Amendment rights upon a certain age. And so I don't know that I could, just me personally, and others may have a different perspective, but I don't know that I would be okay with saying because you are a freshman or sophomore in middle school, that this policy or the freedom to express yourself in that way doesn't apply to you. I mean, legally, Tinker versus Des Moines does not segregate students upon age on whether or not they have First Amendment rights.
Yeah, and I don't think it's saying they don't have First Amendment rights. I think it's the approval of saying you can leave school to go to something, and we're creating a policy that says that you can do that. I don't think that's necessarily saying like you don't have First Amendment rights.
Right, but the something that we are discussing is the exercise of a First Amendment right.
So just to be clear, we're talking about protests outside of school.
As well as meetings and other things too.
Oh,
I want to be
right.
very
Yeah,
explicit about that. Like,
absolutely.
this is not just a protest.
And to
section.
Dr. Brock's point, it's a protest for social justice. It's a protest for repealing the 19th Amendment. Like, you know, you crazy things to demonstrate on too. Okay, thank you.
Our board member Mitchell also was waiting to make comment.
Absolutely. So I think this is a great policy, especially given the day that we're in right now. I see students taking advantage of this, so I appreciate this. I'm in favor of the notice. I do think that moving down to 1 day would create a bit more flexibility there. The one thing that I do want to call out here is that all the events that we have kind of, wrapped in this last bullet seem to be external events. And we kind of bridge the conversation about talking about like school walkouts or things that may happen on a school campus. Is there a need to kind of create some sort of just line between external and internal school events? And is there any liability that we need to think about for students who may want to participate in something that is happening campus adjacent in this policy? That is kind of where my head is, but I do think the spirit of this is great. I just want to create a line on external versus internal, because I think that I would not see a need for a full day's absence for something that takes, again, I don't know how long a walkout or something like that happens on school campus would take, but just want to make sure that we're being mindful of that bubble of just kind of like example as well. So, but I think that this is great policy, but external, internal, just want to know if we given any thought about that.
Madam Counsel?
That was a lot to think about. So now I'm thinking about the possibility of, let's say there was a school walkout that had not been approved in advance by the school. But the parent sends in a day's notice, said, my kid's walking out, this is gonna be part of protest, all the kids walk out. And that's an excused absence. But that's also disruptive to the school. When a bunch of kids walk out of school. And
Can you define material disruption? Because that's what the law, that's the letter of the law.
it's
So
like
what is that?
pornography, you know it when you see it. But if learning isn't taking place, that's a disruption, right? If learning cannot take place, that is a disruption.
Within like the classroom setting?
Within the classroom, within the school setting. If other adults need to be deployed to, and I hate being like the big bad whatever. Anyhow, if adults need to be deployed to monitor hallways because kids are in the hallways where they're not supposed to be, that's a disruption. So this is not the armband in Tinker versus Des Moines. This is kids being out of area. This is a disruption of the school. So while it might be an excused absence does not excuse disruption of a school. So let's say it was a protest that started off campus, totally, completely off campus. We had parental notice that this was gonna happen, but the protest comes on to campus somehow. We're gonna have a school consequence for that.
Correct.
So can I, Madam Councilor, I want to make a suggestion, just a wondering. The spirit of this is so students can be civically engaged. So I think a couple of things. 1.6, I think we got to be careful in 0.6, because I think about sometimes there being an election where, you end up with a runoff. So now you've got 2 elections in a calendar year. So we're going to give you 1 time approved to vote, but 2 times to act on, 2 times to walk out, right? So I think we got to be really careful about what our values are. The value of this is to be civically engaged, right? Like at the end of the day, that's the value, to be civically engaged. And so the policy, there's the policy and then regulation. My suggestion, half a cent, is that we beef up our regs, which already exist, and when we pull actually some of the language that's in the last bullet into regulation, right? Because that's a lot of that's in the sausage making and like how it's going to be carried forward, which honestly, we need to do some pushing and pulling we can bring back to the board to be able to see. But from a policy standpoint, what I'm hearing the board say is that you want students to be able to have two opportunities. They can have as many as they want, but they'll have two excused opportunities to be civically engaged. And the only requirement that's really clear is that there's at least a one-day notice in regards to like some kind of communication with a parent or from a guardian or what have you. And if that's the case, then we can speak to that in this last bullet and then work on the regulations, which is a lot of the detail that goes into how is it actually executed, and bring that back to the board.
I agree with that. I would be curious if it, to your point about voter registration, if either A, we need to actually say not to exceed 2 days for runoffs, right? So perhaps we need to have a change there. Also, in the last bullet, the change, I am curious about if we should put, to the spirit of what Dr. Brock said, student/parent notice.
I'm not sure I understand that part, the student/parent notice?
Right, because there was a conversation around what if a parent is not in political alignment, if you will, with the desire of the student, how?
Just to add context, like in our student advisory council meeting, there's a lot of conversations about protests and walkouts that are happening right now, and we just referred to the handbook like I was kind of mentioning earlier. And in the handbook section 7K about unauthorized school walkouts, it says that students must provide advance notification to the building, and there's other processes, at least 3 days notice, et cetera. And then if the students do not comply, they will see level 2 consequences. So in the handbook, it talks about students giving notice, and then here we talk about like parents only. So I see where the motive is for adding students, and also just maybe updating this handbook, because if we're gonna make space for unexcused absences, then we should also make it where students will not, receive automatic level 2 consequences, kind of like you were talking about, Ms. Johnson, about maybe after the parent can provide, more information.
I agree with that. I do like the opportunity for like a retroactive notice, one after the fact as well. I think if we included that too, I think helps us cover more bases.
So on the idea of who gets to give notice, either before or after the fact, to have it count as an excused absence, I have significant legal heartburn for it to be anyone other than the parent or guardian. Whether, I just do. I just do. And there is a real legal distinction between a school-approved walkout or in-school protest where students are considered present at school. They're not absent, versus an excused absence to be away from school.
And let's be clear, if my 17-year-old son, okay, I'm gonna be a dad for a minute, not superintendent. if my 17-year-old son walks out of an Atlanta public school and I don't know, and something happens to him, I'm gonna talk to the board chair myself. I'm gonna talk to myself, and I'm gonna talk to the board chair and anybody else who's involved in the policy. So I think we have to be very, very, I'm just being dad for a minute. You know what I'm saying? I sent my son to school, and I wanna be real careful about this, like, because this is an important conversation, in particular in this day and age. But our chief responsibility is to improve student achievement, unapologetically, right? And our students understanding the importance of their voice and being civically engaged and minded, and connecting all of that to, the opportunities that exist within the classes and within, the extracurriculars and co-curricular things that go on, I think are super, super, super important, in particular in this day and age. And there's a way to go about it. And honestly, a lot of it does go to the school level in regards to just the relationship that the principal has with the students. I know we had peaceful walkouts across Atlanta Public Schools over the last couple of weeks or few weeks. That all went, as well as could be expected, and large sums of students participated.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I do have feels about that. I do understand, like, our student handbook says one thing, and that is also too, part of the process is when we do the work here, then afterwards the regulation changes and alignment happens after the fact. So that will have to happen. Dr. Brock, did you have?
Yeah, I think to what Dr. Johnson said, I think that's kind of why I was mentioning the civics thing or connection in some way, because putting on my former AP hat, I'm like, well, what's the point? What are we? Because again, you're gonna have some students that are like, I was with a student yesterday who was just like, I want to be in policy. I want to do this. I'm like, get it, girl, love it, right? And she's gonna go and probably, go to a couple of these meetings and it's gonna be amazing, right? But it's like when we make a policy like this, it's for everybody. And so it is also for a student who maybe has a bunch of unexcused or excused absences, who may have some attendance challenges. We're not putting anything in place here to say you cannot also go exercise your voice, right? And so I think we all, it sounds like, agree with the spirit of this, and I want to figure out a way for us to make this happen. I also think there's just so many conversations that we might need to have in addition to this one. Again, thinking about that, I was thinking again, teacher hat then, right? It's like, okay, not your big test day. You're this is the day. And granted, it might be the day, right? That might be a coincidence. But yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of things to work out, but I do want to figure out how to make it work because I do think it's really important and can connect to student achievement. And I'd love to just kind of think about how that happens. And I don't want to be you have to do a project afterwards. I mean, that's personally what I would probably say, but I understand that that's not realistic. But I'm like, what, are we writing something? Are we doing a blog post? Doing a vlog?
Totally, if y'all want to impose, you have to write a reflection after the civic engagement.
So that was actually a part of my white sheet form that I sent over, and it didn't make it here. But I do support that, but not a requirement, but the option for a school to require it. All right, so not that we mandate it always, but that a school would have the choice to do an optional reflection assignment on the civic action.
All right, may I problematize that a little bit?
Sure.
I go to X high school, and I can go to 2 protests a year, and I'm out, and that's all I got to do. Mm-hmm. And then my friend goes to Y high school, but they got to write a paper after, and my friend at Y high school is like, why do I have to do that when you can just go off and do your thing and not even worry about it? And we're all part of the same system, and these are all the same kinds of absences for all the same kinds.
Get a cooler principal. No. But I'm not, I definitely, I could see that. I don't know. I still feel good about it being optional for a school to do. If I were an administrator, I would 100% of the time make the assignment, but.
How about we leave that for the reg too?
I'm open for
Yes,
feedback.
that would definitely,
Well, or as we get into this community service
Yes.
piece,
yes.
Okay.
there's some
All right.
opportunity.
Well, in the spirit of time, can we, I guess, table this for next
Table?
month?
Yes.
And just
Yes.
continue having more conversations? Because I think we
Yes,
got to do more
sure.
cleanup on
Yes.
this. That sound good?
Yeah.
Live with it a little bit more?
Yeah, and have conversations with more students about it, more teachers, more I just kind of want to see how this lands with school leaders and people like that too. I feel like everybody hopefully would want this, so I figure out how.
And I'm sure there's going to be community feedback specifically on this, so I think it's good to create space for some community feedback so we can think deeper on this.
I have a question. When you say table it, will it just go to next month's policy meeting?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes. So it doesn't go away. It's just we're going to live with this some more, take on it. It was a lot of robust conversation, and just kind of, sift this down to see where we can make good compromises and get the best polished version of this. Yes. All right, Ms. Carolyn.
Thank you. So we probably should have ordered these better, because our next policy that we will be discussing goes back to our earlier conversations around protecting those most vulnerable that come into Atlanta Public Schools. And so when you look at policy JBC, school admission, we've really wanted to add language in this policy where it calls out APS also recognizes that it has the obligation to serve all such students, regardless of citizenship or immigration status. Accordingly, APS shall enroll all students who meet age and residency requirements without respect to their immigration or legal status, and will further not inquire into such status. And that was just part of the earlier conversation as we look to ensure the safety of all of our students. This is up for discussion for the board.
Thank you. Any feedback from my colleagues?
Now, the only thing I have to say to this is I like this in writing. I think there are some people who don't know that you're not supposed to inquire about this. And so I do think it is good to have this in writing. I remember when I was a college counselor, some students finding out for the first time what their status was, which, you know, I think that's for a family to figure out. But I think as a school, I just love having it here and like for people to know that this is a student's right to have that privacy.
And, you know, to be clear, this language about not inquiring into status is already in the administrative regulation for enrollment. But we thought it might be a good idea to repeat it in policy where it is, it's a little more etched in stone.
Student Rep Brooke?
Well, I feel kind of confused about this because where it says will not inquire into such status, like for the sake of protection, I think there's a version of this where it is important to inquire. Maybe not, maybe there is, I don't know. So they cannot inquire or they should not inquire?
They cannot inquire, meaning we will enroll every single student who meets age and residency requirements. If you live within the city of Atlanta and you are school age, you have a right to access Atlanta Public Schools. Your immigration status, your citizenship status does not matter.
And then should you feel you need help regarding these things, you would reach out to someone?
If you want to voluntarily disclose it to seek some kind of, that's up to you. That's a choice that we'll let a family make, but that's not something we're going to impose on anyone.
Understood.
And I think I also want to echo that based upon some of the previous policies that we have discussed, we're offering the same protection to all students. That, you know, the process for any external agency to engage one of our students is the same, whether that student be a natural born citizen, immigrated from somewhere, or otherwise. I have no feedback on this. I'm constantly reading these lines, thinking to myself, would Board Member Briscoe Brown had pointed out a comma somewhere or something, so I just don't want to let her down, you know?
We're relying on Brooke for that.
I know, no pressure.
Well,
Brooke.
I do see an unnecessary space.
Oh.
Okay, but wait a minute. I'm a 2 space after a period gal, so you will take that second space from my cold dead hands.
Oh, gosh.
It's MLA format. So.
No, it's just in some parentheses in children of APS employees where it says from transfer process to C policy.
But also, yes, I actually caught that too.
Pre-existing, not our fault.
Yes. So if we could also fix that error and perhaps put a space after process as well, that would be helpful. We're gonna call Miss Cynthia because we're gonna say you let one slip And we found it.
And we found it.
Okay, is there a motion to move this to final approval for the board?
Motion to move to final approval.
I will second that motion. All in favor of moving this forward to the full board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, we approve this policy.
Okay, so our final policy that, for discussion today is board regulation, BBBAR4. And we'll pull this up. And this is around board office financial procedures. And this is up for discussion.
I guess I'll hop in. So I was, while reading and reviewing this policy, I like what I noticed as the change from current standing, or actually, could you clarify what are the changes that we are making in this policy from the standing procedure?
So this is a brand-new policy.
Okay.
So there is no standing procedure, there is no standing policy. This is to put bumpers around how the board office operates from a financial perspective. And in addition to having to comply with policy DJEA, which is our standard district-wide purchasing policy that speaks to things like competitive bidding and all those good things, it puts a few extra safeguards. It makes clear that your executive administrator is in charge of the board office budget, and that individual board members shouldn't be directing expenditures. But it also states that if there's a board-approved budget for the entire district every year, and that includes the board office function as well. And as part of that budget-making process, the executive director will present a proposed budget for the board office that has a certain amount of dollars for supplies and a certain amount of dollars for professional expenses. And what this policy also states is that if the executive director has to reallocate resources over $10,000, let's say your supply budget was $1,000, and that's a silly number but whatever, let's just say it's $1,000. And your board executive director now needs to spend $20,000 on supplies. That additional expenditure, even if there is money in the overall board office budget, needs to come to the board for approval. So the board has closer visibility into how board office dollars are being spent if they deviate from the board-approved budget.
Chair Johnson?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And so what I want to highlight for this one, and this came from Board Development Committee, and I know we talked about it before the holiday break. One is the timing that we're considering this because we're getting ready to approve the new board office budget. And to ensure that, Michael has an opportunity to align, because part of it asks on his behalf to have regular kind of reviews of the budget by the full board so we can be aligned. And so that once we approve this budget that he's going to share with us in the next couple of weeks, we want to be, feel really comfortable about those items, and also feel comfortable about the process should anything change from a board perspective. And so I just want to highlight the statement here that says the board also intends to lead by example and model good stewardship of public funds. And I think prior there wasn't anything written that helped us kind of honor that in terms of purchasing, in terms of travel. And so we want to really lean in here for board office specifically to ensure that we are also being compliant and leading by example, and that it's clear what the steps are if there are any changes. We're following the same vending processes that the district follows and procurement. Like we just wanted to actually have that documented for everyone's support. I do have a clarifying question question, Madam Council, just around the travel piece, because here's where there is a little bit of question around does this, so it says that the travel spending limit is not to exceed the board member travel budget, which we know is $7,000 per board member, but I believe there is a separate travel policy that says if they are representatives, we have to go and change that policy, that it doesn't count towards their travel if they are a representative for a conference or an organization. We need to change that specific policy, or can we notate that here?
So if you want to, if it is the board's desire to keep that exception to the travel budget, like if you're the
So
representative.
it's not, I think we would want to maintain the
Remove
piece
that?
to remove that and have it, anything above that $7,000 needs to be approved.
Okay, so then we would, the board would need to amend the travel policy to remove that provision, and then everything would be in conformity.
Okay. Right, and so I just, getting it for my newer colleague up to speed, these are just some pieces we wanted to have in writing for board reference so that we can continue to operate in high fidelity.
One of the things I do appreciate about our current travel policy is that it gives board members the discretion and flexibility to engage in professional development opportunities based upon their own desire or, perspective.
Sure.
If we have a board member that is, say, I don't know, our representative for CUBE, for example, they will have to go on whatever trip that is.
Sure.
Are we then limiting their ability to have autonomy in picking their own professional developments because they are required to be our representative for an organization that we're a part of? Like, are we now not limiting their funds?
So I don't see that as limiting, and let me just say two things. I think previously there was kind of concentrated representation across multiple groups by a smaller number of members, and so we're shifting that really soon to have broader representation across the board at some of these opportunities like CUBE, because we want to be able to bring those learnings back into the space. And I think, for the purposes of this policy, I believe what Nina is saying is we can't tackle that particular iteration here. But I think what I am sharing is, up to $7,000, whatever mix of professional development and conferences and representation you so choose, that is absolutely fine. Anything above that, we just want to be mindful that the board is fully aware and that it is within reason and that we have followed all of the travel policies outlined by APS.
Okay. And my other question is around the first bullet under competitive bidding process. Purchases of goods and services between $10,000 and $49,999.99 require a minimum of 3 written quotes. As it stands in board policy or procedure now, I'm not sure the distinction because I think our handbook says one thing, but does this apply to? Well, just let me get some clarification maybe. As it stands, isn't the board chair able to approve purchases up to $49,999.99 without full board approval as it stands today?
It depends on the kind of purchase.
Okay.
So there are certain purchases that are exempt from competitive bidding requirements.
Okay.
So if it's a sole source, if it's a single source, if it's on the state exempt list, those are exempt from competitive bidding and don't need to go to the board for approval at all. In fact, let me say this, up to $49,999.99 don't need board approval, period. There are certain ones that need competitive bidding, certain ones that don't.
Is it possible for us to include that distinction in this bullet when we start putting together the actual policy so that there's no discrepancy? Because as it reads, as I would receive it, would be we have to get 3 bids for everything.
So if you go down further, it says the exceptions to competitive bidding listed in policy DJEA apply.
I digress.
So that is one of those. That is one of those exceptions. And additionally, I read this policy to say that the board doesn't have a budget. the board office has a budget. And this policy makes very, very clear that your executive administrator is directing all spending from that board office budget. So individual board members won't be spending anything except for their travel, of course, but everything else is coming from the board office.
Is there any other feedback? No? So seeing none, I guess we can continue conversation on this next month and perhaps put it on the agenda.
Sure, so I guess what would be, to bring it back here for discussion next month.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Like put it on our formal agenda, put it into like a workup on the actual policy.
On the policy, okay. So Nina, will you support us on the policy piece?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You feel good about that? Okay. Do you support that, Dr. Brock? All right. Is there any other questions or comments by my colleagues? Do we have any community members signed up for public comment?
We have one additional
Oh,
item in other business.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm running low on time. Okay.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
rushing us. I'm sorry. You got it.
So this is just a discussion around community service and graduation requirements for our high school students. There's been some research around APS requirements. There's been the conversation around student attendance. And so to marry both of those, we really wanted to seek your guidance on digging into policy or guidance around community service and graduation requirements.
Yes. I remember us having, Dr. Johnson and I had a really good conversation about this maybe a week or two ago, that there are many students who find themselves struggling to meet the volunteer hour requirements upon graduation, and that perhaps we should consider other, like attending school board meetings, attending city council meetings, attending state legislature, very much in the spirit of the change we made around attendance, short of the protests or civic engagements, if you will, that perhaps those meetings should count towards, and it could be a number, attend 2 or 3 school board meetings, or, 3 meetings out of all of these different bodies. Furthermore, just a random thought, I would definitely encourage us to think about how we could include local and municipal government education into the fold of what we're doing as a district. As a government teacher, the amount of time that we spend on municipal government per the standards is extremely minimal and not specific to unique municipalities. So students aren't learning about Atlanta City Council, Atlanta's, the Fulton County Commission, the Atlanta Public School Board. And I think the consequence of us being intentional about that will be that we'll see more people coming out to vote when school board's the only thing on the ballot, or voting all the way down the ballot because they're well aware of who these people are, what they do, how they serve, and why they should be engaging these folks. I've got a lot of energy around us being intentional about that. I said a lot. Any comments, feedback? I guess the meat of it was the meetings, the public meetings potentially serving as a qualifying engagement instead of the volunteer hours. So it could be, and we're just coming up with it, this is kind of white sheeting it, but a certain number of meetings or what have you.
Almost like changing it from community service to like community engagement.
I like that. Yeah.
Well, I agree with the point of making them, making community engagement qualify. For example, attending student advisory or being on the student advisory council for a whole school year, etc. But I don't know. When I think of community service hours, I definitely agree. As a senior in high school, I may have mine, but a lot of my peers around me don't have the necessary 140 hours to graduate, and they have until February, I believe it's like February 28th, to get all of them, and it's like a scramble for things to do. I don't think it should be like a necessarily amount of hours, but if we're to say that those things qualify, then there just always has to be something in place. Like, it might get tricky for students because when you come, like, I was just saying, I think APS should like broadcast that on their website, because the process of approving hours, it's like you have to take pictures, you have to get it signed off, you have to have the email of the person. So if we broadcast that, you know, on our website or something where people are like, go through here if you want hours, and I think it would work.
Yeah, a couple of points of clarity, kind of put to both points. Point one, point of clarity is we wouldn't be looking at anything for this academic year because we're so far down the road. But one of the things we heard a little bit last year, then I've heard much more this year, is an opportunity around the community service in particular. And specifically, I was at a school no more than 2 weeks ago, and I was, well, it had been week before last, it was Counselor Appreciation Week. And I was asking counselors, I was asking their counseling team at this particular school, what's one thing we could do to help you execute on your work better? And I asked everybody that question, and I said, you can tell me anything except pay, because everybody's going to jump to pay right off the bat. And the first place they went was to community service, and the example that was given is a particular graduating senior that has multiple siblings whose mom works an evening shift, and she's at home with the kids, and it's like they're scrambling to try to figure out. So I don't think the goal would be to eliminate community service, not to eliminate it, but to expand the optionality and also provide some more clarity. I think that's one of the things that our counselors and folks are grappling with. And so we've heard this like north, south, east, west in regards to the entirety of the district, and think there's an opportunity. And so if everybody agree, we'd like to go do some digging. Dr. Skid's done some work already on a research team, but we like to actually look at the, you know, how practical some of the options are and could be, and to get some student feedback, counselor feedback, and et cetera.
I have a thought, putting on my counselor hat again. I'm like, why, right? Like, why do you do community service? And to me, I'm like, okay, we're writing your college essay, and you're talking about that in the essay, right? It just enriches your application to your post-secondary pathway. And we hope it makes you a better human. We hope it makes you care more. We hope it makes you have empathy, sympathy, all the things. But with that first example of the why, I do think that opening it up could actually be really beneficial for students, because if you go to a city council meeting and then all of a sudden you are like able to write about that, talk about that, or it gets you really excited and motivated, I think that's actually just as important as going and spending time at a senior home. So there's that. And then I also just wonder if in the spirit of that, is there room to then add things like, and I don't know if this is a part of internships or, I also think, I mean, maybe like not a popular opinion, but working also, I mean, this should be an exemption of some sort for that. If you're a manager at your store, that's major, right? And so I do think there's kind of like the why behind it, and if the why is actually so that students can have those experiences to be able to share more about them and develop as a human, then I'd love to like think of different ways we can open that up.
In the spirit of like a job, I wonder if like there could be a delineation around like if you work for a nonprofit. Because to me, that's like a whole different type of work. Like, what if you're working at Boys and Girls Club, or you're working at the YMCA, or...
Agree. I just think I like, so here's where I come from around this conversation. I think we serve such a diverse student population. And so I know we serve, and the reality is absolutely to the nonprofit, but on the other side of the equation, we got kids that have jobs out of necessity because they absolutely have to work. And so like we constrict the student experience so much. And now they're scrambling, and I'll be honest, like everybody's trying to figure out how to, get approvals of how, you know, circumvent. Like, we should just have the conversation about what this is, what we're trying to get out of it, going back to the why comment. And so the spirit of the conversation would be to say what things may actually work, and what things may be exclusions and opportunities, not to eliminate, but really to expand and to make it, you know, more relevant for today.
If I read a college essay about your journey as an Uber Eats driver, I'm in there, locked in. Like, these are all the people I've met along. I mean, that's gold, right? I mean, and again, like, I say that in jest, but also like all of those things are meaningful, and I think it's just like, again, getting at the spirit of like the why. And if the why is experiences, I think there's a way to be more inclusive for the reason you just mentioned.
Just another piece to add about community service hours. There's this thing they call like they consider buying community service hours. So for example, that would be you get 0.5 hours for every pair of shoes that you bring and donate, or you get an hour. We have this like box drive, like gifts for students and children or children in the children's hospital. And the more gifts you bring, the more community service hours you bring. But our school, I don't know if this is Atlanta Public Schools wide, but they're moving back from you can no longer do stuff where it's like, I'm giving you a tangible item and then I give you hours. So I was curious to know some perspective on that.
We just first bluff real quick, like that's a real dicey one. I struggle with that a little bit because I've seen it play out the wrong way in classrooms academically. Like how many canned foods you're gonna bring to be able to get a bump up, you get 10 extra points, and it's like, it's not meaningful. So I would have to be real careful because it becomes the haves and have-nots. I'm sure the spirit of this when implemented was around like, let's help our students understand the importance of giving back. I think that's important, and at the same time, we need to create flexibility and opportunity to connect to passion and connect to just real life. So,
All right, I love that. I think I guess we continue the conversation next month on this as well.
Yes, we will continue the conversation next month around policy, board office financial procedures, and the community service.
Thank you. That being said, I believe we're going to work on our date for March, and March 19th is our date. Thank you. I just texted you, was like, did we set a date? Okay, so March 19th will be our next meeting. Is at 12 p.m.? At 12 p.m. So March 19th at 12 p.m. is our next meeting. Mr. Warburton, is there anyone signed up for public comment?
No one's on a public comment.
All right. See, this is why we need to change that policy so we get some kids up here to do some public comment, right? And they'll have an excused absence. All right, that being said,
Wait, so you're gonna be absent all day for 2 minutes?
well, we're gonna have to mind our manners up here, okay? Because the kids gonna come pulling up. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? See you next month.